Let's talk for a minute about the SEC in 2024 and how the SEC did in the bowl games. I think generally, so going into this bowl season, looking at the past several, the SEC traditionally does incredibly well during bowl season, even though that we're in this bowl era where people opt out, right? And bowls have taken on kind of less meaning than they have in the past, but um, obviously I would say the marquee loss has got to be Georgia, right? Georgia just losing the playoff game, but Texas won, so maybe does that balance it out there a little bit?
Maybe a little bit. We'll see what Texas does this week. When you play, I'm not trying to take anything away from Texas on this, which
Yeah.
maybe I'm about to. When you play a team that was ranked 16th and got in because they won a weak conference, and then you play another team that was, outside of the top 12 and won a weak conference, then I think that you probably get a little, like, Texas to me gets a little bit less credit than Georgia gets blame, right? Like, I don't think they balance out.
Yeah.
But if Texas goes out and beats Ohio State, or even just keeps it competitive with Ohio State, then I think it might kind of weight back that way. But I need to see Texas, first of all, put together a full game, and second of all, like, beat somebody that doesn't suck. I don't think Arizona State sucks. I don't think Clemson sucks. But, like, comparatively, Texas has a top 3 roster in the country. Clemson and Arizona State are not close to that.
Right. So, outside of those two playoff teams, then we go to what I would say is like the next
Tennessee
tier.
too. I didn't write Tennessee down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're an
Tennessee as
embarrassment.
well. Tennessee just kind of got embarrassed. And I would almost put Tennessee, like, I feel like Georgia and Texas are kind of in a tier above where I would have put Tennessee, Bama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss, and almost looked at those four somewhat interchangeably, right? They were all, I would say, about relative the same talent level, about relative the same record. Tennessee happened to be the one that got in, but I could make an argument for any of those next four. Obviously, Tennessee got blown out. They did play who I think is the toughest team in this playoff at the moment in Ohio State. I don't know that they lose round one if they're playing some of these other teams in there, but they lost, right? So then we look, Bama plays a Michigan team that we said earlier is incredibly depleted, opt-outs, injuries, the gamut. Bama's a 2-score favorite, and they lose, right? Which the optics of that is not great.
Yeah, it's hard to cry wolf or cry foul, right? And then go out and get embarrassed by Michigan,
sure.
right? And so it's kind of like, all right, well, the issues that you had through the year that cost you against Vandy and cost you against Tennessee and cost you against Oklahoma, like, those issues showed up again against a Michigan team that is talented, but certainly not on Alabama's level this year or many years. And so, yeah, that's a bad look for Bama. Again, it's one game, but their season in totality was not one game, right? They lost 4 games they shouldn't have. And I think they were they not at Tennessee? They were not. 3 of their losses, they were double-digit favorites.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable,
Yeah,
right?
unacceptable.
I don't really care about that. I mean, I do care about the bowl loss, but that one means less. But still, they lost 3 games as double-digit favorites. Like, that just cannot happen. How many games did Saban ever lose as a double-digit favorite? Like, probably not 3 in his whole career.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think 3
Let
ever.
alone 3 in one season. So they weren't Bama this year, right?
Yeah.
Like, they were still really good. They'd beat 100+ teams that play in this sport, but they certainly, weren't Alabama.
Yeah. Well, and then after this game, Milroe opts out, or not opts out, but declares for the NFL, which was kind of an interesting thing for me because he didn't play particularly well down the stretch here. He definitely didn't play well against Michigan. Thought it was really interesting. The announcers seemed to kind of be making excuses for him, like, oh yeah, that throw's really bad, but he's one of the best in the country, or, not looking great today, but man, if he returns, he's a Heisman favorite for sure. But yeah, so they'll be breaking in a new quarterback next year as well. Milroe in the NFL will be an interesting thing to watch for sure.
I saw Felipe Franks catch a touchdown today, so maybe he just needs to go
when
the
you
route
think
of not
about
quarterback.
the career that man has had, what is he on, year 9?
Milroe needs to go not quarterback, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a fact. Then we talk about South Carolina, another one of those teams that I put in that kind of the tier below Texas and Georgia. They were a 9-point favorite to Illinois and they lost. And they're one of the teams that was beating their chest as well. Hey, we could have, should have been in the playoffs.
Yeah, they were somewhat challenged offensively at times this year, but I mean, their quarterback played and their really good defensive line play. Like they were there.
Yeah.
And so, to lose to Illinois, like, it certainly got a little heated there at the end with the coach's stuff at the end, which was pretty entertaining to watch. But yeah, again, you can't lose to Illinois. I don't care who opts out or who doesn't play. Like they didn't lose to, a really good Penn State team that just missed the playoff. Like they lost to Illinois, right? And Illinois had a better year this year than many were probably expecting. But that's, again, you can't beat your chest of like, we should have made the playoff or we deserve this or that, and then go out and just embarrass yourself. And I get it. Bowl games don't matter, but they had some, you got to go out and win. As a 2-score favorite, you need to go win, right?
Yeah.
If your guys are playing and you're a 2-score favorite at a neutral site, you need to go win. And, they didn't.
The only team in that tier of teams that held up their end of the bargain, and Lane Kiffin is not going to let us forget about it the entire offseason, would be Ole Miss. They blew out Duke. Wasn't close, really took care of business. And I do love when a team gets snubbed, right? And they still show up for their bowl game. They put in a full effort. Obviously, not a meaningful bowl in any stretch, but they showed up and they did the thing. Are they maybe the only team that had the legitimate argument that, hey, maybe we should have been in? And to be fair, all they had to do was win and then they would be in. But
yeah, I saw, yeah, it becomes that argument that we had earlier, right? Of deserving and best and this, that, and the other. And, I don't think Tennessee getting blown out invalidates their merit for having been in, but do I think that Ole Miss probably would have been more competitive than Tennessee? I mean, probably. Like they're just built a little different, like offensively, and I think they would have shown up a little bit better. And you look at some of their losses, like their loss to Kentucky, they really controlled that game and blew it late. Their loss at Florida, if not, they had really bad turnovers that kind of cost them in that game. They outgained Florida, not to go the whole Mullen route of yards matter that much, but they played well enough outside of their massive mistakes. And so, yeah, I mean, if you just finish a little bit better, they probably would have been more competitive. But at the same time, just like I'm not going to fire DeBoer over an Alabama loss to Michigan, I'm also not saying that Lane Kiffin's the greatest thing that ever happened because they blew out Duke. Because, I mean, first of all, it's Duke. Second of all, Duke had a lot of, they did what we thought Alabama should have done to Michigan. Duke had so many opt-outs. They had so many guys not playing. They went out and they wanted to make a statement against a team they matched up really well against, and they did it. And so I do think there is a lot of credit that's deserved there, but that doesn't undo the way that they peed down their leg against UF and Kentucky.
So the SEC as a whole in 2024, now that the season's over, what are your impressions of the conference? Down some?
They're not, I agree with you fully that they are still the toughest week to week. Like having to play Arkansas and Auburn as your mid-level teams, like I would absolutely rather play Cal and Wake Forest and Rutgers, right? Like they're or your bottom of the barrel Big 12 teams or your bottom of the barrel, wherever. I would absolutely still say they're the best top to bottom. But I almost wonder if because it's almost like the SEC's greatness could also be its demise. I don't know. I'm thinking this through as I'm talking about it. But obviously the SEC has made so much money because they've been so good and their programs have invested back into themselves. And so you do have recruits that are at times picking Missouri, and you do have recruits that are at times picking Ole Miss. You have recruits that are at times not, and Missouri never recruited like this before. And you've got Kentucky picking guys off. You've got South Carolina picking guys off. And so all of that money that's been generated because the SEC has been so good, let's be fair, riding on the backs of the elite programs like the Bamas and Georgias and Florida, 15 years ago. Like, because they have ridden, I don't want to say ridden those coattails, but it has allowed all the other programs to invest that back in. Whereas
rising tide raises all boats.
It does. But where are they taking those elite players from?
Each other.
Exactly.
Right? And
Ohio State, and I don't think that happens in the Big Ten. Like, I don't think the Big Ten makes a lot of money too, but I don't think Rutgers is investing back into their program like a Kentucky is or like a South Carolina is.
Yeah.
And so or an Illinois or,
Well, and it's a thing of the
Wisconsin.
past that you're going to sit for 3 years at Alabama, pick up a couple of national titles while you ride the pine, and then play for a season or 2 for them before you go to the NFL. Now all of those guys that would be on the bench for the first couple of years as they earn their stripes, so to speak, are just jumping ship to a Missouri, to a Kentucky, to a Florida, to anywhere that where they can immediately start and immediately make the NIL money.
Yeah, and I don't think that again, I don't think that that is as much of a problem in the Big 10.
Right.
I don't think it's as
Because
much of
there's
a problem.
still only a couple of great teams
Correct.
at the top.
They're not losing Midwest guys to, Minnesota, right? Like they're
Yeah,
not like they're still
yeah,
going to the big programs. Ohio
yeah,
State, Michigan, Notre Dame, I know they're not in it. Penn State, and that's about it, right? Like somebody
yeah,
might grab a guy here. And I don't even think it's a problem. I mean, look at the it's a much lower level of this too, but it's not really a problem in the ACC either. Like people aren't
no,
picking guys off from Miami or people
right,
outside of the conference, sure, right? Like if
sure,
Miami's in a battle with Georgia, but like
right,
the ACC it's still top heavy, right? Like
yeah,
even with going 2-10, Florida State still had the third best class in the conference, right? Like
yeah,
guys are still going to go to Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and everybody else is going to have to take the leftovers. And so
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that the SEC's greatness is kind of it been where it's leveled off. Now I will say this: it is 1 year, right? And
yeah,
so does that change a little bit? Does somebody kind of right like can a Texas kind of have more long-staying
mhm,
success because of the money they pour into it? Can a Georgia get right back to where they
sure,
were? Absolutely. Could somebody rise up and take it? But it feels like because there's so much more parity within the conference
yeah,
now, it feels like it's going to be harder for a team. Like I don't know that we'll ever see that sustained dominance. I mean,
yeah,
we talk about Georgia. Georgia very well could have lost to Kentucky. They very well could have lost to Florida. Like Georgia could have been an 8. They could have lost to Georgia Tech. Like now they didn't, right? Like they
mhm,
found a way to finish. They could have very easily beaten Bama. Like there were
yeah,
things that the ball's going to bounce your way or that way. But like the
yeah,
dominance that we've seen from Georgia year over year, like they
yeah,
could have been an 8-4 team this year,
yeah,
right? I mean, they went to 8 overtimes with Georgia Tech, a 7-6 team from the ACC, and so I just think that that dominance that we're used to seeing, it's hard to imagine
yeah,
it'll be so much tougher to build like that
yeah,
team. And then you factor in all of that with we are going to beat the hell out of each other every single week, right? Like,
100%.
and so it's because everyone has elevated so much, or most teams have elevated so much in the SEC. It is not just, the joke was always, it's just Bama carrying the conference. Like everybody else stinks, which was never really the case. Like Bama was just so
Correct,
much better than everybody else.
right,
But the small bit of truth that there was to that, because they were so much head and shoulders of everybody else. Like I don't know that we ever get that for a sustained
yeah.
amount of time anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It'll be interesting to see. You're going to have a whole bunch of 9-3 teams instead
Hmm.
of one or two, 12-0, 11-1 teams. And obviously, the way that the schedule matches up year after year is another factor in this as well, because there's 16 teams, so you don't play everybody every year. So there could be the best team in the conference who gets the draw of playing, let's say, an Alabama, a Georgia, and a Texas in the same year, and that skews things as well. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see going forward. I'm interested to see how these last couple playoff games shake out as well. Do we have, some more SEC dominance? Does Texas pull it off? Does Notre Dame finally, get back on top? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. Thanks so much for watching this clip from our live show of a peek inside SEC football. If you enjoyed this content and would like to support, we'd love to have you subscribe. We are live every Sunday evening, and we'll be back for another episode soon.